We are back with a special edition of What's Next Longevity Deal Talk. This is one you don't want to miss, focused on new research on the longevity economy outlook. This episode is made possible by the Longevity Ventures Summit, something else you don't want to miss. It's coming up June 16th through the 18th. Look at your calendar. It's hosted by the Age Tech Collaborative from AARP at UC Berkeley. Citrus is the location. It is a dynamic agenda with a wide range of thought leaders, investors, and innovators. Hurry and register if you haven't already. The site is longevityventuresummit.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary. The excitement is building.
Yes, this will be our 23rd year, Fred, and we have a truly amazing agenda. We're even giving attendees the opportunity to sign up for a certificate in AI and longevity.
That is a great opportunity. Mary, our guest today is amazing too. Ani Harityunyan, who will be presenting at the summit, by the way, and is an expert with the AARP Thought Leadership Team leading the longevity economy portfolio work, including the publication of the flagship Longevity Economy Outlook reports. And there is a new one just out. Thank you for taking time with us, Ani.
My pleasure to be here, Fred and Mary.
Ani, I really was pleased to be part of the team that provided some insight into the report, and we so appreciate you joining us on the podcast and at the Longevity Venture Summit next week. The work that you and the team at ARP are doing are just market leading. It's so vital. So let's take a look at some of your key findings, the headlines, and we made them the centerfold in our agenda.
Yes, so the Longevity Economy Outlook series at ARP estimate the contributions of the 50-plus-year-old Americans to our economy and society. And our Outlook 2026, that was released just last week, presents data from the year 2024, the latest available. And I'm going to tell about that a little bit. But first of all, I want to thank you, Mary, for being a part of our advisory group. And while we were drafting and analyzing the findings, and thank you for all your insights and advice on the way. So what we found is that 50-plus economy is one of the largest and fastest growing markets, despite many businesses still treating it as a niche segment. We find that 50-plus population generates 12.5 trillion in economic activity. That's a huge opportunity for businesses to tap in. We also find that older adults are staying active and engaged in their later years. They are working longer, they are starting businesses. 1 out of 3 workers in the US is 50-plus-year-old. 50-plus-year-old adults, they also pay most of the taxes. In fact, 60% of all federal tax payments comes from 50-plus years old adults. So they also support nearly half of the jobs in the country, 98 million jobs. And they provide 2/3 of family caregiving, and they also lead in volunteering and giving. So adults 50-plus provided the equivalent of $1.2 trillion in unpaid care and volunteering in 2024. And that's in addition to $12.5 trillion that I mentioned that they contribute to overall the GDP.
Wow. And you are forecasting the growth and the impact of older adults will be continuing, right?
Indeed, Mary, we actually projected that the impact is going to grow in the coming decades. So the $12.5 trillion contribution to the economy that I mentioned is going to double by 2060.
Ani, were there some findings here that you found surprising trends or other findings?
Yeah, there were findings that we didn't anticipate getting. For example, when we published the previous report, the Longevity Economy report that had data on 2018, we also had some projections how this is going to grow, and we anticipated to get to that $12 trillion projection in 2030, but we got to that in 2024 already. So the contributions of the 50-plus, they grew much faster than we previously anticipated, and that was surprising. And that's also partly because the economy in general in the US has grown much faster than it has been projected, but also the 50 plus population has grown. We are adding 1 million people like 50 plus year old every year. But what the other thing that was surprising is that although 50 plus population overall is growing, that growth is not homogeneous. In fact, we found that compared to 2018, in 2024, the age cohort that's 50 to 64 years old has actually shrunk. So it's much smaller than it was before, the 50 to 64 age cohort. And that has implications on the consumption spending and on labor force participation, etc. And we also found interesting trends in consumption spending of the 50 plus year old headed households. So where they spend their money. We found that nearly half of their money is spent in healthcare and housing and utilities. But when it comes to looking what's the fastest growing spending category for the 50 plus year old, that was communication and electronics. Very tech, very AI driven market. Had about 62% growth since 2018. And this is the fastest growing category in all consumption, among all consumption categories. And which means there is more demand than we anticipated. And this is again, huge opportunity for businesses to tap in. We also found that the second largest the fastest growing category is transportation services. 55% growth since 2018. In fact, the other consumption category, which captures motor vehicles and parts, more like privately owned vehicles, has grown only 5%. In fact, that was the slowest growth we have seen among consumption categories. So there is a demand shift that we see among 50 plus, spending more money on transportation services to move them around rather than owning their own cars, boats, or airplanes. So we clearly see that shift in the consumption spending that happened in the past years, switching from motor vehicles to transportation services, which includes both ground, air, and water.
I assume that might include things like Uber and Lyft, which obviously have grown tremendously.
In the past years, yep.
And I would say GoGo Grandparent and Silver Ride. And one thing I've seen as the boomers turned 80 is, from 80 to 85, you would rather have an Uber or GoGo Grandparent, someone take you out at night, because driving at night is more difficult, but also meal delivery. So transportation for service delivery becomes more and more important. And we're only going to see the boomers lean into their 80s. And so, it's really interesting, that transportation. And, and finding, Ani, that when we first did research with SeniorNet many decades ago, it was because older adults had more time. So the fact that they're embracing and learning about AI because they have to upskill in this workforce, and then the data you have about caregiving is just really impressive. I think that part of this is showing older adults as contributors to society, right?
Very much so. They're volunteer. They charitable donations. More than 70% of charitable donations in this country comes from 50 plus year old headed households, and the caregiving, both adult caregiving and child caregiving, is huge contributors to our economy. To our society beyond the economic activities that they are engaged in. So these are unpaid activities that don't show up in GDP, that don't show up in the national statistical numbers, but they provide lots of value to our society every day.
Now, this is such a huge undertaking, really amazing work, Ani. Tell us a bit about maybe the team and the methodology used in developing the report and forecasts.
Yeah, so this comes from the thought leadership team at the AARP, and this is in collaboration with the Economist Enterprise, which conducted the data analysis. And for this, we used the REMI model, which is a very widely used model when it comes to economic impact estimations. And also here, when I say what we are measuring, we are actually measuring the ripple impact of 50 plus population economic activities. So the direct impact is 50 plus population consumes works and pays taxes. And while they are engaged in those economic activities, they create demand in the economy. And this demand creates more jobs. And these jobs hire people who themselves work, pay taxes, and consume. And that's the ripple effect. And as we call it in economics, the multiplier effect that we are estimating using the REMI model and some satellite models developed by the Economist Enterprise.
So, we'll be covering a bit about AI at the Longevity Summit, very much in context. How is AI being used in senior housing, in home care, in healthcare? Are older workers more or less at risk because of the growing use of AI?
That's a very good question, Mary, because there has been significant media attention supported by emerging research showing that AI has slowed down hiring among younger workers. But what's the impact on the older workers? There hasn't been much attention to that. But recent economic research has actually begun to fill the gap. So the data shows that older workers are more concentrated in occupations and roles where AI is less likely to substitute and take over their work. These are the roles that tend to rely heavily on experience, judgment, interpersonal interaction, communication, and decision making. So the kind of like tacit knowledge that AI models have not been trained on and cannot really perform those. So these are areas where human capabilities actually become even more valuable as AI adoption accelerates. So in that sense, older workers may hold a relative advantage in an AI impacted labor market because that's the skill set they bring in. Again, like
just an anecdote about that. My cousin was an electrical contractor, very successful in his career, and they're building data centers all over Virginia, and they needed to have older workers come back and learn how to manage the teams for the data centers. But I love the concept that the skills that older workers had in the workforce about that they learn through management and how to support and grow teams could come back in through their influence.
Absolutely, because now you not only need to manage humans, you also need to manage the AIs and like supervise the decision making, like the inputs, like manage the inputs and make like the decision making. So like experience, judgment, communication, like this become even more vital in this era. And then, so in that sense, yes, older workers may hold a relative advantage. However, we also need to see the other side of the coin, right? So the older workers are also generally, like the research has shown, generally less likely to switch occupations or relocate, which can make labor markets transitions more difficult for them during periods of rapid change that AI can actually cause. So this reduced mobility may actually leave some older workers more vulnerable to displacement, and we should be mindful of that. So I wouldn't say that the impact of AI on older workers is either like positive or negative. While older workers have a relative advantage that I mentioned, they also face risks that we should be aware of. Therefore, when like a key priority for employers is to ensure that experienced workers are fully included in AI trainings initiatives, rather than confining these programs only to entry-level roles. And yeah, and if you are attending the Venture Summit, whether you are an older worker or younger worker attending the Venture Summit, take part in the AI certificate program. I'm going to take part in that as well. That will serve you well in the job market.
Yeah, we offered sessions for beginners and we offered sessions for those who are more advanced because we wanted to provide a safe place where you could ask questions. And so that's very exciting that we all are turning back to our learning mode. We're all going back to school, Fred.
Ani, the report includes some takeaways, and I think you've already covered some, but for industries, employers, and governments, tell us a bit more about that.
Absolutely, Brett. So I would like share like three takeaways for now that comes from based on the data insights we had. So one of them is that older workers are increasingly becoming the core part of the labor force and not like a niche segment that's going to retire soon. They're really the core part of the labor force. So the question now is how to sustain the engagement in the labor market, especially like taking into account the impact of AI on the labor market and other disruptions that may happen. And the second takeaway, like for industries, employers, and governments, is that we see increasing demand for aging in place. So yeah, people want to age in their houses or somewhere like private, but the supply doesn't seem is gonna meet the demand. We would like to, because like most of the housing infrastructure in the US is built for young families, like with long distance driving. So we would like to make sure that businesses and governments treat age-ready housing as essential infrastructure. That we really need that. And the third takeaway I'd like to share with you is that longer lives generate demand for certain goods and services. However, the large investments, we see that they flow towards life extensions and health extensions, which is great, like biotech and therapeutics, very great. But how about also producing goods and services that make those longer and healthier lives more enjoyable, more engaging, more fulfilling? That's a huge commercial opportunity that businesses should tap in. So not just make the lives longer and healthier, and we have made lots of progress making the lives longer and healthier, but also produce goods and services that make those lives more meaningful, more enjoyable, more fulfilling.
Well, Fred, you and I have covered a lot of products, from the Withings scale to the Tonys to picture frames and ways to capture memories. I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, entrepreneurship, and really a lot of the best minds in the country are coming to the conference next week because they're inventing new solutions and they're attracting investors to support their solutions. So Ani, this is just market leading work. We're so excited, and thank you for joining us. We look forward to much more next week.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to diving deeper into this data and other points at the Venture Summit next week.
Thank you, Ani. And Mary, that's really just a taste of the kind of really useful information attendees can expect at the Venture Summit next week.
We really do have the cream of the crop speaking and taking part, leaders from HHS, the top leader in California, as well as the venture community, and then fast-growing companies growing from 30 to 100 million in home care and transportation. A lot of the things that you mentioned, Ani, as services that are needed, we're going to be meeting and listening to those entrepreneurs as really great skill building workshops, like how to go to market in Florida, where 1 in every 6 older adults live. So how to be an influencer and how to work with influencers. It's a very exciting time. I've heard that we're going from the pony, isn't it the year of the horse, to the car, but maybe to the spaceship, all in a few weeks, Fred. So it's the most exciting time, and we're thrilled to be hosting this next week.
Well, check out the website, longevityventuresummit.com. Hurry up and register. We hope many of you will be there. One of the great benefits, Mary, is always the discussions, even the deals that take place every year. So once again, we want to thank Ani for spending time with us today. You won't want to miss her at the summit either. Thank all of you for watching or listening, and you can always find us at maryfurlong.com/podcast.